Greetings and salutations. I'm Sky and I make art. And contrary to public opinion and many popular fan fictions, I did not spawn in as a fully formed being with a paintbrush in my hand. No, dear viewer, I too had a childhood. After spawning in from the void, that is. And in this happy childhood, I engaged with many sources of popular entertainment, one of which was the Scooby-Doo franchise. And being an artist with altogether too much time on my hands, I figured I would take this very near and dear to my heart series and reboot it in my own glorious vision. Scooby has seen many reboots already, some of which were fantastic, like Mystery Incorporated, and others, less so. I'm looking at you, Scrappy-Doo. So, Scooby-Doo isn't a stranger to reboots and spin-offs. Great. But where to start with my reboot? Why not high school? Why not the 80s? That would give us a lot of interesting fashion to play with. So, the 80s it is. Shaggy Rogers is a junior in high school and the best driver in the group. Although Fred would never admit that. He's been driving deliveries for his family ever since it was legal, and a little bit before, but we won't hold it against him. The Mystery Machine is actually an old delivery van that his parents gave him. But apart from when they need his help with deliveries, they don't really care what he's up to. He's got Scooby to look out for him. Having never been the popular kid growing up, he kinda kept to himself and Scoob, who he calls his best pal. It's hard to say who has more separation anxiety, him or Scooby. Ever since Scooby was a pup, Shaggy's tried to find more and more creative ways to sneak him into school. The most recent development of this was to try to convince the school counselor that Scooby was a service dog. This didn't do anything to help him get his pal into school. Scooby-Doo is a Great Dane, and was rescued as a pup by Shaggy on his 14th birthday. Shaggy had always wanted a dog, and his mother finally convinced his father that a dog might do him some good. When Shaggy isn't around, Scooby is often fitfully pacing and even turns down food. He's one of those dogs that really wants you to be there while he eats. So this has led to many days where Shaggy was late to school because he was watching his best friend eat. He's an unusually smart dog, and Shaggy insists he can talk, although no one quite believes him. He can actually talk. He just gets stage fright around people. This hasn't done anything to help Shaggy's teasing, but he would never, ever hold it against his best pal. Their favorite thing to do together is to watch Sunday morning cartoons and eat cereal. Velma Dinkley is a clear-cut nerd. She spends most of her time alone or hanging out with the one person who has as much interest in paranormal as she does, Fred Jones. The two have been best friends ever since middle school, and they've been practically inseparable the entire time. Velma usually sat alone at lunch before she met Fred, and she read her paranormal investigator magazines, until one day, an awkward blonde kid walked up and asked if he could trade magazines with her for the lunch. He'd already read his issue of Traps Weekly several times at this point, and he wanted something new. They quickly bonded and formed a Traps and Paranormal Club. They had a few members join them at various points throughout middle school and high school, but mostly it was just them in a messy room with old pizza boxes, tin cans that used to have soda pop, and their notebooks and blurry pictures cut out from magazines claiming to have spotted some terrible monster crawling through the woods after dark, supposedly with eyewitness accounts. Fred Jones had no real interest in fitness, other than how it helped him with his real passion, traps, and ghost hunting. The first unspoken rule of trap building and ghost hunting was that you needed to be fit enough to get into strange places, and to run from any ghouls you encounter while you're there. The second unspoken rule was to know how to get out of your own traps. If you're chasing ghosts, you will eventually probably end up in your own traps. He had read about this sort of thing happening all the time. No one understood his passion quite as well as his best friend, Velma. She was always helping him improve and try out new traps from his favorite magazine, Traps Weekly. They were planning on going on a real ghost hunt soon. They just had to find the right place. Both of them had agreed that after all their years of rigorous training, they were finally ready for the real deal. Ghost hunts had to be done right. They were delicate, and to prove to anyone that you actually saw something, you needed proof. Not just mediocre proof. Real proof. Hardcore evidence. That's what the traps are for, and the photography classes that they had been taking together. Daphne Blake was the popular girl at school. She had all the money, all the coolest friends, and the best house. She loved tennis and had a passion for photography and debate. Apart from her photography classes, she didn't really have any association with the weirdos in the trap club. Who would want to be in a trap club? What would you even do? She'd had a few assignments with them, and she could confirm that they were anything but normal. Thank goodness she never had to see them after graduation. She was going to college to get her law degree. She'd even gotten a debate scholarship, and her parents were so proud. Now that you've had the chance to meet our main cast, let me tell you a bit about my experience while designing them, and then hit you with the plot for the first episode. When I first started designing my reboot, I only had a few thoughts in my head. I wanted to set it in the 80s, since I can't recall any Scooby-Doo shows that were specifically set in the 80s. Aired in the 80s, sure, but not set in. At least not officially. And the other thing I specifically wanted was for Fred and Velma to be shown as friends beyond just being in the mystery gang together. When I was doing research for this reboot, I found a few amazing pieces of art showing Fred and Velma being pals, and I just thought, yes, I have to incorporate more of that. After that, it was just figuring out more of the details. When it came to redesigning the gang, I had a few issues, one of which was a shoe curse I seemed to have acquired between starting this venture and my full-body drawing hiatus. In fact, this lineup was the first time I've tried to draw a full body, including the shoes, in a while. So the XP loss was measurable, painful, and visible. The other issue I had was with making the gang look like themselves while also still looking unique from the other Scooby-Doo reboots. I wanted each of them to look recognizable as themselves even without the context of the show. I also wanted them to look unique from one another if you simply look at their silhouettes. I feel I've done a pretty good job at this. Daphne's design gave me more trouble than anyone else's. I wanted to try something new for her since she usually wears a dress. I tried to put her in several different outfits, however, none of them really felt like Daphne. So I went back to the dress idea and eventually decided on giving her a skirt. But Velma also wears a skirt. So I gave her heavy ruffled designs and a blouse and made everything shorter and cuter. This contrasted with Velma's softer, heavier materials, the sweater, the tartan skirt. I think that this created enough contrast between the two of them that I'm really happy with it. I also played around with the idea of changing Scooby's design a bit, like giving him a service harness and turning him into a real service dog for Shaggy. But I thought that was straying too heavily from the original idea of the show, so I scrapped that idea and reworked it as a minor plot note. Now, on to the main event of the video, the plot for the first episode of what I'm calling How Are You, Scooby-Doo? Because people always ask, where is Scooby-Doo? But never, how is Scooby-Doo? Scooby-Doo, How Are You is the tale of the early years of the Mystery Gang. How they met, why they met, and what did they do after that? The first episode is a long one, a 1-hour special actually, and it goes a little something like this. Daphne Blake is looking forward to her graduation. In fact, she's throwing a massive party for her friends. The only problem is there seems to be someone who's set on ruining her fun for some reason. Every time she tries to make plans for something or tries to do a mock-up for her party, things get cancelled and mysteriously trashed. But her party isn't the only thing being affected. Lights flicker in the house constantly. Things get moved around, things even go bump in the middle of the night. It's creepy! It's gotten so bad that her parents are considering moving out. That would be fine with her if it weren't for the timing. All her friends are here, and starting in another school right before graduation would really suck. The only thing she can think to do to stop this terrible thing from happening is to ask the kids from the trap club for help. Maybe they can Nancy Drew their way to saving her party or something. Daphne invites the trap kids. What were their names? Fred and Velma? Yeah, Fred and Velma, that was it. She invites them over to her house to check things out. But they need to be careful to stay out of the way of the other party things going on, of course. This is where Shaggy and Scooby enter the picture. Remember when I said his family owned a catering business? They're the ones catering the party. So, while his parents are discussing details of how things will work, Shaggy and Scooby are there. They aren't needed right now, though, and it's lunchtime. They bump into the other members of the soon-to-be mystery gang and get invited to lunch. They're talking about traps, so Shaggy perks up and says he's really good at knots. He was in the Boy Scouts when he was younger. One of his dad's attempts to get him to man up. Fred immediately asks him if he's ever thought about joining the Paranormal Activity and Traps Club. Shaggy kinda shrugs, but he says he might join. So, he's in. They decided to set up a stakeout since most of the suspicious activities seem to be happening at night. Armed with their flashlights, cameras, and an abundance of snacks, they huddle in the living room in the dark, listening for anything that disturbs the silence. Eventually, everyone is falling asleep. And nothing has happened all night. It's as if the thing knows they're there. Then they hear it. Muffled scraping sounds. And what might be footsteps. It's only there for a moment. Then it's quiet again. They wait out the rest of the night jumpily, listening for anything else. But nothing happens the rest of the night. When Shaggy gets back home, he hears his parents complaining about the Blake order being canceled. He immediately calls Daphne to ask about it, and she says they didn't cancel. So Shaggy asks, who canceled the order exactly? They tell him that he didn't give his name. He just said that the order was canceled. When the gang meets back up, they go over their potential suspect list. The Blake family had a handful of employees working for them, so they started there. The only male workers they had were the butler, cook, and the cook's son, who was just a part-time helper. The person that made the most sense to them was the cook, Leon. But he didn't seem to have a motive. They would need to set some kind of trap to figure this out. They decided to set up some party decor and see if anyone came to take it down in the middle of the night. They also set a net trap to catch whoever it was. After a long night of nothing happening, there's finally noises outside. Then, their net goes off. They quickly turn on their flashlights and run to the scene of the crime. Something is dangling in the net, struggling. Freddy leads the pack triumphantly and shines his flashlight at the culprit. But it's only a raccoon. Shaggy sighs, his heart was pounding out of his chest. Like, it's only a raccoon, guys. They get into the trash at my place all the time. He reaches out to lean on his best friend Scooby. Maybe they're the only monsters wrecking your party, Daphne. Right, Scoob? Scooby peeks at him in terror from behind Freddy, and Shaggy realizes he's not leaning on his best friend. He turns slowly to see what he's been petting this entire time. A werewolf is staring him directly in the face. Its breath is hot and smelly. He stammers, "Werewolf!" There's a lot of yelling and commotion as the werewolf roars at them, and they all scatter and run to find somewhere to hide until Fred remembers it's not a full moon. He rallies everyone to follow him as they track the werewolf paw prints. They seem to just vanish at the kitchen door, and the door is locked. "I think this proves who our werewolf is," Velma says excitedly, and they all exchange high fives. They tell the Blake family the next morning, and the cook is fired and taken to jail for destruction of property and stuff like that. The gang is a little bit reluctant to split up now. It was kind of fun, but what reason did they have to keep hanging out? Daphne invites them all to her party this weekend, and they go their separate ways. Nothing else happens for a few days. Everyone settles back into their normal patterns, and life is life. Then, Fred gets a call in the middle of the night from Daphne. There's noises in the darkness again. The gang rushes down to meet her. They start in the kitchen this time. The noises seem to be coming from the wine cellar. They make their way down there in the dark. One of the display shelves for the wine is crooked, and there is a hole behind it. It looks like a mine shaft, maybe? A dim light is coming from somewhere deeper in the tunnel, so they venture in cautiously. They don't find much down there, just some abandoned mining tools and other things you'd expect in an old mine. They also find a modern lantern and some other tools that don't belong. They look more closely until they found what's being mined. Gold. The next day, the gang goes through all the books they can find in their local library about town history, until they find details about a gold mine that was closed down shortly after being opened. They decide to set another trap and see if they could catch this werewolf. The gang returned to the mine that night. They decided to use Scooby and Shaggy as a bait, so the two of them did their best to dig out some gold while the rest of the gang waited for the wolf. When the wolf finally did show up, Scooby and Shaggy lured it into the net after a lot of shenanigans. When they finally had their beast caught, they unmasked it. It was the chef's son. Zoinks! Jeebers! Jinkies, but why? I was going to be rich if it weren't for you meddling kids. Daphne shook her head. But the mine was closed down because everything in here is fool's gold. What? Didn't you do any research on the mine before you started scaring people off? Thelma asked. He didn't reply. They had him arrested and his father released. The party was saved and they were once again faced with splitting up. Only none of them really wanted to. They agreed to keep in touch and look for monsters sometimes. But they needed a name. What about the Mystery Gang? Shaggy suggested. And things just kind of got better from there. So, what do you think of my Scooby-Doo reboot? Worth a watch? I hope so. Stay creative, and I'll catch you later, my lovelies.